Anyone who believes in indefinite growth on a physically finite planet is either mad or an economist.
We don't want to focus politics on a notion that involves the rejection of principles around which a large majority of our fellow citizens organize their lives.
We are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think.
Imagine you have a sector with an annual income of £60 billion and nobody really knows what it achieves or scrutinises it very much. And then imagine it is made up of 160,000 registered bodies, many enjoying rather handy tax breaks, who are equally under-scrutinised and employ over 700,000 people. Well, this is, broadly speaking, the charity sector. Now, everyone involved in the not-for-profit or charity sector is driven by a sense of mission and passion. That is what makes it such an exciting and worthwhile place to be. We give a fiver by standing order once a month, or sign up for a sponsored cycle ride. A similar thing applies to those setting up or working for charities and voluntary groups. Many could be doing something else, or enjoying more leisure time, or getting paid better in public or private sector job. Yes, many in the voluntary sector get paid, which some diehards feel lets the side down. But very few are involved to maximise profits, improve share prices, or earn as much as they can. Now, of course, this is not the story everywhere. There are those who give to increase their chances of meeting Prince Charles or to get a knighthood, those who are corrupt or looking for tax advantages, and those who run what I increasingly call business charities, where social purpose is one among other objectives. But these are the exceptions. For most, it is about passion, mission, and doing good. And what fantastic motivations. But good motives do not guarantee good outcomes. So when people say we should leave charities to it, satisfied by their objectives and their selflessness, and stop analysing them, I just cannot agree. Yes, we should admire charities for their dedication, but I don't think we should be happy with simply meaning well. Let me propose instead that we need some creative destruction in the charity sector. There is some complacency out there, as I will go on to outline, just as there is some very good practice. If we want to identify one from the other, and to encourage one over the other, then things are well overdue a shake-up. Charities seldom think about how effective they are at turning charitable funding and donated time into social outcomes. They are not generally under pressure from funders to start doing so either. But this is surely what they are all about. And the way they achieve this is broadly through what other sectors call productivity. Yet you rarely, if ever, hear this phrase used. It is little more than a four-letter word, as though sacrilegious to the very ethos of what it is to be involved in charities. Yet productivity and its close cousin, innovation, are crucially important. These two things are about using resources in the best way possible. The alternative is to accept achieving weaker outcomes for the people and causes you care about. We don't just want every charity doing the best it can with the way it works today. We also want innovation. This means constantly searching for new and better ways of, for example, organising the back office, or delivering interventions, or using social media for mentoring. So what is holding the charity sector back? Well, passion and a fantastic sense of mission do drive activity. This is also an impediment to doing our very best at both the level of individual charities and for the sector as a whole. The desire to give and do often overwhelms the desire to achieve and constantly improve. But many other factors also play a part and hinder the creative destruction that is needed. First is the constant search for funding, the obsession of every charity chief exec. This ought to put an onus on charities to prove they do their job well. However, in practice, it mainly seems to drive innovation in fundraising techniques. As former Shell Foundation and Institute for Philanthropy boss Kurt Hoffman recently put it, when the best and brightest working in the charity sector are spending so much time fundraising, this happens at the expense of devoting conscious effort to innovating and improving performance, which is by far the most important source of value creation in every other product sector in our economy. But the problem on the funding sector side goes further, since most private voluntary sector funders are not really trying to maximise return, in this case social return, for a given level of resources. They do want to have a positive social return and may undertake brief checks to ensure money is not being totally wasted, sequestered, or otherwise causing harm. But this is very different from searching out the most efficient organisations or innovative parts of the sector and putting money there. So there is limited pressure on charities from investors looking to invest in the best. Charities also suffer because of the tightness of the funding they receive and the fact that much is restricted to particular uses. Donors unhelpfully look at metrics to do with the percentage of money going straight to the beneficiary, which militates against longer-term developments. The funding regime contributes to a second problem of weak feedback loops. from funder to charity and vice versa, as well as between charities and their beneficiaries. For charities, the person who pays isn't the person who consumes, and charitable funders rarely move their funding because the charity is not doing as good a job as another. All this means that if we think of the charity sector as a system, there are no feedback loops driving us in the right direction. There is no invisible hand of market forces, where beneficiaries go to a competitor if unhappy or funders support a clearly better charity, to help calibrate the system in real time towards improving productivity and innovation. Nor does it happen as a result of citizens and users saying what they think very clearly and publicly, as they might in the public sector. With honourable exceptions, and despite the best efforts of many great charities, voice, not very powerful in the public sector, is often extremely faint in the charity world. In the absence of all this, charities focus on working out what the funder wants so as to guarantee their own survival, taking attention away from what they are achieving and what their beneficiaries need and want. We at MPC often hear from charities about funders giving in haphazard ways, asking for slightly different information to another funder for no good reason, not giving enough certainty on future funding. But this rarely reaches the ears of funders, because charities are keen to maintain their support. As Stanford University's Rob Reich puts it, people who become foundation officers are often surprised to find themselves transformed into the smartest and best-looking people in a room. This contributes to a third problem for the sector: too many entrances and not enough exits. The process of new charities starting up and others closing their doors does not work well in the sector. And when it does happen, it is not clear that the worst are replaced by new, better charities. Why do too few charities exit? Because it is possible to continue even if things are not going that well. As Professor Kimberly Scharf of Warwick University points out, although people start charities to solve a particular problem, they tend to try and keep them going even if another charity is doing a better job. The so-called warm glow effect that you get from doing things via your own charity outweighs the original motivation of doing good. It's unsurprising then that mergers, never easy in any sector, are particularly rare in the charity sector. Without incentives to maximise value, in this case social value, it's not hard to see why mergers rarely come to pass. At the other end of the life cycle, it is fairly straightforward to launch a charity. There are few barriers to entry and often little need for much start-up capital. There is often less due diligence than a business start-up would get from a potential lender. So, if someone is happy to give you the money, you're basically good to go. It then becomes harder to scale up for a whole set of reasons, so charities often operate below optimal size. One knock-on effect is that the bigger players have little reason to fear being pushed out by a bold new entrant in the way that the arrival of Microsoft forced IBM to completely transform. This guides the argument that at a sector level, we waste resources